to Changelog and Friends, a weekly talk show about DevRel and ZIRP. A massive thank you to our friends over at Fly. Over 3 million apps have launched on Fly, including us, and you can too. Learn more at fly.io. Okay, let's do this. What's up, friends? I'm here with a new friend of mine, Jasmine Cassis, product manager at Sentry. She's been doing some amazing work, her and her teams, over many years being at Sentry, and her latest thing is just awesome. User feedback. You can now enable a widget on the front end of your website powered by Sentry that captures user feedback. Jasmine, tell me about this feature.
Well, I'm Jasmine. I am a product manager at Sentry, and I'm approaching my 3-year anniversary. So I've spent a lot of time here. I work on various different customer-facing products. More recently, I've been focused on this user feedback widget feature, but I've also worked on session replay in our dashboards product. With user feedback, I am particularly excited about that. We launched that a few weeks ago. Essentially, what it allows you to do is it makes it very easy to connect the developer to the end user, your customer. So you can immediately hear from basically who you're building for your audience. And you can basically have a good understanding of a wide range of bugs. So Sentry automatically detects things like performance problems and exceptions, but there are other bugs that can happen on your website, such as broken links or a typo or a permission problem. And that is where the user feedback widget comes in, and it captures that additional 20% of bugs that may not be automatically captured. I think that's why it's so special. And what takes it a step level above these other feedback tools and these support tools that you see is that when you get those feedback messages, they're connected to Sentry's rich debugging context and telemetry. Because often, I've seen it myself, I read a lot of user feedback. Messages are cryptic. They're not descriptive enough to really understand the problem the user is facing. So what's great about user feedback is we connect it to our replay product, which basically shows what the user was doing at that moment in time, right before reporting that bug. And we also connect it to things such as screenshots. So we created the capability for a user to upload a screenshot so they could highlight something specific on the page that they're referring to. So it kind of removes the guesswork for what exactly is this feedback submission or bug report referring to.
Now, I don't know about you, but I have wanted something like this on the front end pretty much since forever. And the fact that it ties into session replay, ties into all your tracing, ties into all of the things that Sentry does to make you a better developer and to make your application more performant and amazing. It's just amazing. You can learn more by going to sentry.io. That's sentry.io. And when you get there, go to the product tab and click on user feedback. That will take you to the landing page for user feedback. Dive in, learn all you can. Use our code Changelog to get $100 off the team plan for free. Now, what she didn't mention was that user feedback is given to everyone. So if you have a Sentry account, you have user feedback. So go and use it. If you're already a user, go and get it on your front end. And if you're not a user, well then, hey, use the code Changelog, get $100 off the team plan for 3-ish months, almost 4 months. Once again, sentry.io.
All right, we're here with our old friend, multi-time recurring guest. Too many times to count. I don't know, Swyx, 3, 4, 7, 11 times on the pod. I'm not sure, but you're back. It's been a little while. Good to have you, Swyx. Welcome back.
Thanks. Good to be back. Been always a loyal listener, and it's just an honor to be invited on every single time. Like, it never gets old.
Well, we love your enthusiasm and your availability. You know, I can hop on with you on Monday and say, hey, you want to come on the pod tomorrow? And you're like, let's rock and roll. So
it just means I keep myself relatively free. No, it means I currently do not have a real job. That's what it means. It means I don't have.
There you go.
I did move a meeting, but that's just because it's easy for me to move stuff because I am my own boss now, effectively.
Remind me where you're at in the world again.
Yes. So I am now no longer having a real job. I always call it 2.5 companies. It's the Latent Space podcast and newsletter sort of media empire, which we can talk about later, the AI Engineer Conference, which just finished 2 weeks ago. And I also have my own venture-backed company, Small AI, which I'm working on with a couple engineers. So it's hard to describe because I don't work at a regular employer. I kind of split my time between 3 business ventures, but that's just how my attention is spent. I think each of them independently have different time horizons of success, and hopefully they all have a common theme of like me being a prime mover among the AI engineering field.
How do you make money?
So the thing that actually currently makes money is the conference that I run. We have now successfully run a 2,000 person conference for the first time ever. And, same deal with most conferences. You sell tickets and sell sponsorships. You pre-commit to a whole bunch of expenses up front, and then you freak out for 3 months, hoping that you sell enough tickets to cover your costs. And then we do, and we make some money back on top of it. And that's the profit.
Well, happy to hear that you're running in the black there. A lot of folks run conferences in the red or very, very near the red. So that's awesome.
Yeah. We had a lot of help because Andre Karpathy basically tweeted about us, and we immediately sold out like an hour later. So I think like for me, it's a long-term game of like, I want to build like the KubeCon equivalent, like the industry, like the definitive industry conference for AI engineering, which is the thing that I decided to sort of place all my chips on. So we don't have to talk about that this time, but I think it's relevant to DevRel, in the sense that when I was a developer advocate or DevRel person, I spoke at conferences, and on a couple of times, we actually even organized company conferences. Like that's pretty much the peak of what you do as a DevRel. And I think for me, like I think any DevRel who like believes their own BS enough should actually go out on their own and do this as an independent business venture, because it is worth much more to dozens and maybe hundreds of companies than it is to a single company.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I remember last time you were on the pod, we had just experienced the ChatGPT moment, I think. It was probably a month or so after that. And you said, like, this is it. I'm going all in on this. I'm learning, right? You were writing, what you do, which is one of the reasons why we invite you on, because you learn in public and we learn from you and with you. And you had made multiple transitions, kind of front end stuff. DevRel, you were thinking back end for a while. I know you were at Temporal doing workflows and backends, and then it's like, all right, here's where I'm going to really dive in. And that was a while ago. So definitely want to catch up with you on that stuff. But the reason why you caught my eye this time around was a post about DevRel and about the zero interest rate phenomenon, which it seems like we're learning now post ZIRP that a lot of things that we were living with and thinking they were normal perhaps were not so normal. They were kind of bubbly or frothy, or maybe symptoms of or side effects of all of this cheap money, which was in our industry, and that quickly left our industry when the macroeconomic situation changed. You have a post which we covered in news just the other day, yesterday as we record, but a few days back as we ship, DevRel's death as zero interest rate phenomenon, where you ask and answer the same question, is DevRel dead? And I have heard a few whispers of this, like, okay, is DevRel dead or dying, or what's going on with DevRel as a thing? And so that's the opening of the can. Swyx, take it where you want. First of all, you say no, but maybe why is it not dead? We'll start there.
I think to claim something is dead means like there's no longer demand for a role like this, and it's objectively not true. I have friends who are desperately trying to hire DevRel with full knowledge of all its faults, because they are close friends of mine, and I have complained to them about the failings of DevRel. So full knowledge that like a lot of DevRel is completely ineffective. A lot of people are really bad at DevRel and they still have the job. Full knowledge of all of that, they still need it, right? So you cannot say the role is dead if people just really demand it still.
Right.
But it is people, the fact, just like with any technology, the moment people start asking, is it dead? It's not quite dead, but it's, it's less cool.
It's not a good sign, right?
Redux isn't dead, but people have been asking, is it dead? Yeah. Like it's declined, and I tried to quantify it. Right. I think maybe my approach is like the first time anyone's actually tried to say like, oh yeah, it's not dead, but how much of it has died. And my number is 30%. Over ZIRP, it increased 200%, and then it declined 30% since the peak.
And where do you get that? How'd you quantify
Google
that?
Trends. That most objective amount of data.
A good proxy for perhaps being truthful, right?
In terms of search, like what's the trend there? Search trend?
Search trends, yeah. But also, and that seems to coincidentally line up with the Common Room industry survey of DevRels, where about 26% of them have said that they've been involved in layoffs. And anecdotally, we've seen a bunch of DevRel layoffs, including my old company, Netlify, including PlanetScale, including a bunch of other companies out there, Auth0 as well. And these are layoffs without replacements. So like straight up, we no longer have DevRel. And that is one form of DevRel being dead, right? Companies that used to heavily invest in DevRel. I'll put this on the record because I couldn't find an authoritative source, so I'll be the authoritative source. Microsoft, 2018 to 19, hired something like 200 DevRels. They call them cloud developer advocates. Some of the top names in our industry spent really a lot of money gathering all of them. And like 2 years later, half of them were gone. It's like not polite to talk about power politics within Microsoft, but there was definitely a big power struggle in there trying to build a DevRel org and not succeeding. I think that was a really early precursor, because that wasn't ZIRP, right? 2018-19 wasn't ZIRP, but it was a pretty early precursor in people having very inflated expectation of what DevRel could do for a business, throwing a whole bunch of money at it, and then realizing that just money alone and just like number of warm bodies alone doesn't actually solve it. Like you actually have to have taste and a clear message and a working system that scales healthily and effectively, and that takes time to build.
Yeah, there's a lot of facets to this, and one of which you mentioned maybe offhand that I think about a lot. I think Adam thinks about it a lot because we talk to a lot of DevRels. Of course, DevRels would love to be on our shows and all this kind of stuff, right? And there's a fine line between a DevRel and a shill, And like, I think there's a big difference between good DevRel and bad DevRel, at least from where we're seated. Like we can just like see through certain things. And then other people were like, yeah, we'd love to have you on, and it's like, there's a big difference between the two. It's clear. And I wonder do you think, first of all, you seem to agree with that? That's generally a true sentiment?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And then, so secondly, it's like when it comes time to die, but then also have life, right? Like there's still value in the position. It seems like, and maybe this is just like stating the obvious or shallow, but it's like the good ones are going to stick around and the bad ones are the ones, no offense to any individuals, but the ones who aren't good at what they do, they weren't providing much value in the first place, right? Yeah,
there's some amount of that, but also inherent in the job, it's a high burnout job, regardless of the macro, in the sense that it's mostly like a mid-career job. There's very, very few chief DevRel officers.
Right.
There's some CDXOs out there, but like there's no career path to like VP DevRel in most companies. Like it's just it's a job that you sign on.
Stepping stone.
It's a stepping stone, or you've just decided to opt out of the rat race altogether, and all you want to do is make content.
Or a lifestyle,
right? It's a lifestyle business, and then there's
travel.
Yeah. Well, for most people, professional travel actually starts becoming a drag. Like it's nice to see your friends every once a quarter or something, but professional travel actually is a drag. Like nobody actually really wants to do that in that role, unless you just love travel. But like that lasts like.
That's what my point is. I've met a few, and maybe they're just saying this, but it's like they just love traveling.
Yeah, check back with them after like 2 years of it. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, over time that gets old for sure. There's only like, even like you go to Sedona or some special place for vacation, like, man, I want to buy a house here, which is how I felt when I went to Sedona. I was like, man, I want to live here. But if I lived in Sedona, and I lived in Orlando, Florida for a while too, and it's like, after a while, Orlando is just Orlando. Now, yeah, I can go to Universal Studios anytime I want, but like, do I? I went there like twice.
Right.
Maybe 3 times over a 3-year span. Like, it's just not vacation places.
It loses its luster.
Exactly. It loses its luster in terms of like, well, I don't think this 2 years of travel constantly is really the game. Steve Klabnik, I think, is probably the best example that I've known of before, well before even any of the ZIRP. Maybe it was even like, maybe it was ZIRP. I don't know. It was free or money. Maybe that was part of it, but not this phenomena we're speaking of when it comes to like COVID and like literally lots of free money out there. This more recent occurrence of it. Steve Klabnik traveled, I think, so much, and he was outspoken about this way back in the day, and just got burnt out bad on it.
Right.
Because you're not built for it. Time zones, travel, you never know where you're at in the world. It's like you're constantly in a different time zone. Your body, your circadian rhythm can't even keep up with it.
Yeah. So, I want to preface this with, I think maybe some people's impression of DevRel is like it's a lot of travel. That number has definitely come down a lot. Part of it is cost cutting, part of it is environmental concerns, and part of it is people just don't want to travel that much. So actually, when I say people burn out of the job, it's actually not only that. It probably is not even majority travel. It's actually just the grind of constantly dealing with people who are new to a technology. So I call this the eternal September effect. Right, that there will always be more beginners. So you're actually, if you care about, for example, viewership numbers, you're always writing the 101 level intro to whatever, and like that is your life for as long as you want to do DevRel, because that's the highest TAM content that's possible, right? The best intro to something, that's the sort of pinnacle of your success is to write the best intro to something. So a lot of people don't want to do that forever. They want to have more seniority and more impact in their work, and impact being maybe financial impact rather than impact on the industry, because DevRel does have impact on the industry, and they choose to move on. So like people leave DevRel not only because they're not good at their jobs, or they just aspire to something different, and that's normal as well. Like this job, way more than other jobs in startups, has more churn inherently. And that's normal. I just want to establish that like it's not a judgment thing of like, oh, you sucked at it, so like you had to leave. Yeah. So like this was a very tough piece to write, because obviously a lot of my friends are DevRel. Like obviously I had that job for a long time, and I'm like a lot of people know me for that and come to me for advice on that. And actually, like, so this post, the idea for this post was actually 1 calendar year ago. I tweeted it on my sort of private alt account, and I had to wait for more people to start saying it for me to be okay publishing what you could read today, because me saying it too early would have pissed off a lot of my friends who had that job. and like, I think for me to find the words that would accurately try to say what I was thinking without also like being too inflammatory, right? Like I'm trying not to bite the hand that feeds me, but I'm also saying like, hey, like let's call a spade a spade. Like there was a mania in DevRel over the ZIRP period, and now everyone can see it. Let's put an end to it. Let's try to learn some lessons from it now that it's okay to say it out loud.
What's up, friends? I'm here with Michael Abbin, staff software developer at 1Password. Michael, I want to talk about how 1Password helps secrets management, secret sharing with teams, with orgs, with production even, really easy. Even so much so that when you spin up a new person onto a team, or you add new people to a team, or even if you take away people from a team, you want to focus on access, and you also want to focus on security. So if you want to remove somebody, you want to make sure they no longer have access to your secrets. And then the flip side is when you add somebody to a team, you want to make sure they have access to their secrets. So help me understand how 1Password helps teams be efficient with secrets management.
So when you have a dev team storing their secrets in 1Password, then it makes it really easy to bring new people on. They already have so much to do and so many new things to learn. You don't need them to have that extra burden of creating a dozen different accounts to be able to access your payments or your errors or your monitoring. You can have that all set up for them already within 1Password. And each of those particular services gets pulled into your local application, your production application at runtime through the 1Password CLI. From there, you have your new developer downloading the repo. They don't have to spend time setting up their environment. All of the different services are ready to go because they're already stored in 1Password. All they have to do is use the 1Password CLI to spin up and run the application, and it's ready to go. It's like developing in the future.
Well, we must be in the future, Michael, because we use 1Password just like that. All of our team secrets, all of our personal secrets, all of our application secrets, they're all in 1Password, and we're using exactly this process to make our lives easier. So friends, go to 1Password.com/changelogpod. They've given our listeners an exclusive extended free trial to any 1Password plan for 28 days. It should be 14 days, but no, it's 28 days. But make sure you go to onepassword.com/changelogpod to get that exclusive sign-up bonus, or head to developer.onepassword.com, of course, to learn about 1Password's amazing developer tooling, the 1Password CLI, 1Password for SSH, and get CI/CD integrations, service accounts, and so much more. Once again, onepassword.com/changelogpod. This Microsoft error you mentioned that was pre-ZIRP, and maybe even after it, like I think one of the reasons maybe there's churn is that it's even to this day, kind of hard to define what exactly is DevRel. And when you have a challenge defining what it is, you have a challenge in defining what it should do, what the function should do, which maybe is the reason why people flunk out of the job or move along or churn, because maybe even in the Microsoft error that you referenced where they hired lots, it was challenging to define what exactly are you trying to do. Because if the job primarily is focused on a function that sits between the company, which usually is a tech product of sorts, a SaaS, a dev tool, a dev service, etc., maybe even an open source company, a cause company, or an open source project, they can have DevRels as well. If the function is to nurture the relationship between the company, potentially the purchase of a product, and the developer community, there's a lot of ambiguity in there in terms of what you can do to be successful. And it might be challenging even as a manager to manage DevRels, right? Like that's like, what do you really do here? What can you do here? What is success in your role? And when you have lack of clarity as an individual, it's kind of hard to maintain what a good friend of mine, Coach Michael Burt says, the prey drive, right? You have to have a reason. It's your because goals. Because I'm a DevRel, these are the things I do in my role, or because I want to do these things within the developer community, I have clarity. When you have ambiguity in your role or lack of clarity, it's kind of hard to kind of wake up every day and be motivated and get something done. Or when you're tweeting or doing social media or doing these things that aren't really seen by peers or adjacent peers like engineers or marketing or sales, is like, that person is DevRel and they're just tweeting. Like, is that work? So when you feel like you don't really, you know what I mean? Like when you're not clear, it's kind of hard to kind of just get up every day and just do what you do well, unless you're a self-motivated person. So I guess all that to say, how much of this churn is because the management or definition of what the role is and what success is of the role is well defined so they can be successful?
I would say, so I worked at AWS as DevRel. I've never worked at Microsoft, but I do think you should have some faith in the big corps to really define roles before they hire for them, because it's hard to open headcount in these things. And so they had their definition, and I think there's more security there just because like these things are very, very well defined, at least internally, for that stuff. What's less defined is the startup side of things, where I just got a bunch of funding. I'm going to allocate one person out of my 15-person team to go be that sort of public face for my company. What is your job? Do whatever seems right. And I had that job. That was me at Netlify. I had no manager for a year. It was fantastic. It was also absolutely ZIRP, because I just did whatever I felt like doing. It was fantastic. And then eventually we got adult supervision with Sarah Drasner. but also like that, I thrived. Like it was the most intrinsic motivational job I had, just like figuring out the meta game. And I think a part of it is with marketing, with anything with people. The true Tao is the Tao that cannot be taught, and the true DevRel is not the DevRel that can be written down. And the moment you try to write it down and try to systematize it, the game has already moved 6 months ago to like the new game, right? If you think like here's the way to success and we're going to scale this for the next 5 years, tough luck. Like people move, like people and trends and move quicker than that. So it can be a really tough thing to nail down. That said, I do have a piece that is fairly popular. I'm told it's like required reading within Google of measuring DevRel. And I think basically, the definition of any job, just from the outset is say you treat DevRel as a black box. Money goes in, what comes out of it? So I have three major buckets. It's community, it's content, it's product. And either you're producing in one of these areas or you're not at all. And I think most expectations of DevRel is like one of these three things. And I can go into those things further, but like you should have some definitions of like what the visible output of DevRel should be from there, and then that basically becomes the job. And if it's not successfully captured in those three buckets, then you're probably doing a different job than what most people think of as DevRel.
I think that's well said. I think that it is really tricky because almost the more formal and described and delineated the role becomes, you're probably on the lower end of the value chain in terms of like actually being able to execute on it well for the reasons that you just stated. It's like you almost need the formula that works really well is like the small startup. And I think you talk about there are companies who are doing really well with no DevRel or minimal DevRel, but they all have like a charismatic leader or somebody who's already very online and very good at being online that just continually brings them more and more interest, more and more community, more and more relationships. And that person's almost a unicorn to a certain extent. Like, can you systematize what they do and then hand it to somebody else and say, go and do this? I'm a bit skeptical. Maybe it can work, but I don't think it's going to work on a repeated basis into the hundreds of employees, right?
Into the hundreds of employees. On a smaller scale, yes. If we're talking about like the Twilios of the world, which I feel like they have successfully done that, it becomes much less personality driven and much more about a repeatable process that can be scaled across every major city. And it might be also a relic of maybe 7-8 years ago when things were maybe more sort of in-person centric. Now that I think online has taken more and more and more and more of our mind share and time and remote working and all that, the sort of online first DevRel, meaning that it is just no location, means that there's no need for repetition and therefore more centralization in a single person. And so I think that's important to note. I think the other thing also, like I agree with this whole, the sort of low level junior beginner person thinks about it as like, oh, I will produce 3 blog posts a month or something. The higher level thought process is I am persecuting a mission, I'm promoting an idea, and the output is 3 blog posts. But those are downstream of me promoting the idea. Like I'm starting a movement. For me, when I talk about the stuff that I do for Latent Space, AI Engineer Conference, and Small AI, I don't think about it as I organize a conference. I think about it as I am starting my own industry, and the visible output is I start a conference. And so I think people who think about it on a higher level have a more coordinated approach to their actions. Even though the actions still look the same, they have a more cohesive outcome because there's a broader plan beyond that instead of the individual units. And I do think like for the junior DevRel, so I do some advising on the side just for fun. And for the beginners who come into the job, like they very much do like the one-off, like, hey, like we got to get this launch right. Like we got to max out this launch and we got to like get all the retweets, like make this the most awesome launch possible. Whereas for me, it's not about the launch. It's about the long running campaign from the past the launch through like whatever's next. And I think getting people to see that whole journey, I think is something that I think levels them up to the next tier. And I think that's what the founders can uniquely do. And you talk about these unicorn founders. That's what the founders can uniquely do apart from the hired guns, which is the founders, started the company because of this whole mission and being able to authentically tell that story, I think is very rare. I think maybe, one possible positive example is Lee Robb at Vercel, who's successfully taken on that sort of voice of Next.js.
A great DevRel, by the way. Yeah. When I was thinking about the good ones, he was one that was in my head. Is like, I think the guy does a great job.
He actually prompted this post on the Dev of DevRel because he was like, yeah, like I've been thinking about this a lot because he and I chat offline quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, like, it used to be Guillermo primarily promoting Next.js and Vercel, and now I think Lee Robb is kind of number 2 in the company, as at least as public facing figures go, being the voice of the company. And I think that's absolutely like a rare success story. I think it's very much a two-way street about the founder being able to trust whoever they hire, and then the employee being able to rise up to the task. And very often those two things don't happen in either direction. So that's what it is. The last thing I want to point out as well, in terms of like why people fail at the job or why measurements fail, this is something I've been thinking about, which I did not sufficiently capture in my Measuring DevRel post, which is that often DevRel, just like any other content or media business, is a hits-driven business, not a consistent output business. I can I used to often say like I'll write 50 blog posts a year, but just one of the 50 will actually be the one that people remember. And it's very, very hard to run any business. It's very hard to learn from any information or any market reaction when like most of the stuff you work on is going to flop. And it doesn't mean that anything is wrong. It means you should still keep going, even though most of your stuff is flopping, because it's the stuff that's going to produce that one hit. That's going to justify everything else.
Right. No, I 100% agree. Any hits-based business is like that. You say, okay, well, all I need is hits. Then I'm just going to
just don't fail.
Publish hits. It's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, well, see, that doesn't. You don't know why it's. I mean, even with this post, Swyx, you said I'm not sure why you guys invited me on, or I'm not sure why this one resonated with people.
Oh, there's many reasons why I'm not sure.
I don't even know why, but I was like, oh, this is interesting, and hadn't talked to you in a while.
I could probably answer that question.
Okay.
Well, I think that we talk to a lot of DevRels. We have a lot of friends and fans and people we're fond of that are in this space that have, I would just say, tumultuous times, right? And so it's a hit because we don't want to see people or companies shrink that particular function size, because that means friends of ours are out of work, or they're changing what they do. They're moving into adjacent roles or different roles, maybe directly into marketing, where DevRel is sort of adjacent to it, but sort of in a lot of cases under it, sometimes even under product. And I think we care because it shows the health to some degree of our industry. If one of the core functions is withering or failing or churning or not right, I think it's an indicator of how healthy the market might be, right? I think that's why we care about this particular function so much, because this is literally where product and the future potential buyer might be. Like, one thing you reference in your measurement is the Shawn question, which essentially is, how would you feel if you could no longer use the product? And so if you ask this question to a free user, a free tier user, and you say, how would you feel if changelog was no longer a thing tomorrow? Would you be, happy, unhappy, somewhat disappointed,
devastated,
very disappointed,
Yeah.
devastated? Thank you, Swyx. I think that if we had a large majority of people saying devastated or very disappointed versus the other two or three options, then that means that we've got some version of product market fit, or we're very beloved. And so we should find a way to exist or live. If that were, us on a deathbed chair, geez, what, this is terrible. Point is that I think that we have a lot of people who are in that space we care about, and any unhealthy measure in this particular space shows signs of an unhealthy market. That's why we care. That's why I care.
Plus, we're looking for answers and explanations too, right? I mean, we see things going on. Some of us talk about it, some of us don't, and it's tumultuous and it's scary and sad. And then you're looking for answers. You're looking for like, well, what was going on? And it's like, well, here's a post that surmises that it was this. And now, okay, well, that rings true. I mean, it rang true with me, which is why I put it on Changelog News. And then I was like, and I like the end of it, like, well, given all of this, like, what now? Or what can we actually move forward? Because we know that it's not dead insofar as it's not a valueless thing. There's huge value in having high quality developer relations around your product or service and all of that entails. But the free money is gone, which was allowing it to bubble. And as we've discussed, now what? In that post ZIRP environment, what does it mean for DevRels? What does it mean for everybody else? Is it still a job that I should go out and seek? Is it not? Is it something that like, what are the now what's? So key in on that point
And what are some of your thoughts being deep in this area of here we are, 2024, halfway done? Who knows what's going to happen by the end of the year, but I don't think we're going to get back to zero interest rates by then. We might see 1, maybe 2 cuts from the Fed this year. Maybe not, maybe 0. But for folks who are either in DevRel currently or considering it or trying to get back into it, like what are your thoughts for them?
Yeah. So I actually tried to leave solutions out of this post because it's been covered elsewhere. And, I haven't identified as DevRel for maybe a couple years now. And there's a bunch of solutions out there. I do think just the straight job hasn't really changed. I think what the removal of free money has led to is basically we can no longer get by with lack of accountability in DevRel. It's probably a good thing. It's probably something that we needed. And so what I tried to do in the post is to list out the smells of what ZIRP DevRel looks like. And so I tried to use that as a checklist for people in the industry of like, if you are doing this, there's no longer any appetite for this. Like it is no longer okay to do like, let's just call it free tier DevRel, for example. Like you only talk about how to use your company's free services and have blissfully zero knowledge of anything paid, because that, that doesn't serve the company's needs. And also actually, more to the point, doesn't actually serve the customer very well because you don't know your product. And there was a lot of free tier DevRel in ZIRP because it's easy to talk about something that you can adopt for free. It's easy to get applause for something that's free. The hard part of and what's really challenging your skills is saying like why your company's products are actually worth real money, and people who obviously were successful at that were probably more valuable to the business anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of thoughts. So I at the end of the post, I linked to Lee Robb, I linked to Sam Julian, who used to be VP DevRel at Auth0, and I linked to myself as independent thoughts. I think everyone's basically the common consensus, let's just say, is that DevRel moves into developer experience, which is kind of a annoying rebrand that every industry likes to rebrand itself. Like in DevOps, there's this sort of ongoing rebrand to platform engineering. Same thing for DevRel.
Same thing for data science, right, swyx? Data science.
We can talk about that after, but I would argue not. But
okay, let's save it.
We can save that. For me, I do think like basically there's a maturation DevRel that I'm looking for, where you don't have the one size fits all DevRel that does the sort of full stack of production to publication to sort of idea generation, and you have a sort of front, middle, off back office DevRel. This is definitely for more sort of scaled up organizations. I was leading a team of 9 at my previous company, and I definitely saw that need to grow more structured process around DevRel. And then I think understanding for people who choose the developer experience path, understanding how you interact with the rest of product and engineering, and having the buy-in to actually have features. Like for Lee, like he straight up just became VP product. Like there was no, we will coexist with product. No, like DevRel just took over product. Like that's how they solved it.
Good for him.
Very, very few other companies will actually let that happen, because products usually has way more political power than DevRel. That's just how it is. Mm-hmm. And so DevRel then gets shunted to marketing and then loses all power from there. I think like having DevRel become PMs is the path that like I think I see some of the really motivated people interested in impact do. And I think that is the right way to do things. But DevRel as a title is going to continue to exist as a primarily sort of marketing and community and docs and function much more than product, just because product is its own beast. It's a much more established industry by far and much more politically powerful, and therefore a harder force to have any impact on. I don't know if anything I said is controversial.
Well, leading product is tough. That's a tough role. What do you know about how things have changed for Lee Robb? Because we've talked to him several times, but I'm not familiar with the details of how the DevRel folded into product. How did that actually play out? How does that roll out now? Like you said, DevRel took it over. What does that mean? I
mean, so he was promoted from DevRel to product. So there is still DevRel at Vercel. It is just far, far less visible than it used to be, and probably for the better. I don't know. They basically just had attrition without replacement, and that's just how the team sort of shifted its priorities. I mean, they needed a VP product, and Lee proved to himself and to the company that he was up to the task, and I guess they promoted him. I can't really speak for his personal experience, just because
Gotcha.
I only hear tangentially from him and other people, but I don't hear the full story. So you can talk to him about that.
I was less on the specifics of his specifics, but more like how they as an organization achieved that, because leading product and leading DevRel is uniquely different, but also not exactly far off. Like, to build the best product, you have to have a connection with the people that you're building it for, which is a function of DevRel, right? A connection to community. But you also have to have business mindset. Like, where do we actually make money? Where do our users really get joy? Where is our business trying to go? Not just where's the product trying to go, which sometimes is similar or the same, but not always. And so I would not suspect it would be easy for a DevRel just to take that over unless they've got some prior leading product management experience, or they're just elite Rob, where they just like slay it,
Again, I'm not really speaking about his specifics, but like I do think that if people care enough about developer experience, then it basically is a shadow product team anyway. This is something I've talked about again and again, which is like kind of the existential problem with DevRel, which is that you're supposed to be the voice of the user. It's supposed to be a two-way street. You spread the good word out. That's the dev evangelist role, and then the dev relations role takes that good word that you get the feedback from the developers and brings it back into the company, except most of the company doesn't want to hear it because they already have backlogs and you're just adding to the backlog and you're not welcome here, go away. So a really good dev experience person would prioritize and justify and go like, here's what our developers are telling us, just like listen to me, like I'm good at the people, and I talk to the people.
Man. What you're shining a light on though is that friction between DevRel's job and product's job.
Yes.
Right. And so rather than fight the fight, merge.
Just take it over. Yeah.
Right. This is becoming more clear. This is why I asked the question, because I was less trying to understand Lee Rob's personal specifics, but more this function of, because I think you kind of clarified it there, where there's that friction point. If you're just kind of going out there and you've got less respect or less political power with product and direction, can you even do your job well? If when you go back to the table and you say, hey, I'm out there fighting the fight. I just flew 10,000 miles last month, spent, 3 weekends on the road, and here's the wisdom. And everyone's
here's what the company paid for.
Right.
Like, we are paying for this.
Right. And then product is like, nah, we got different margin. I've been talking to users too, but in a different way. And so
yes,
we're going to pause your thing because we've got enough backlog already. And I've already led this direction here. So
yes,
it's almost just wasted.
It's absolutely wasted. Yeah,
it's absolutely. Then you go back to the developers that you spoke to.
I was trying to be kind about it, I suppose, by saying almost.
Yeah. And then you didn't deliver for the people you spoke to either, right? Like you couldn't actually get their request represented in a way that gets it. So you're ineffective on both sides. That can be incredibly frustrated, I'm sure.
Yeah, I call this a two-way umbrella for the company to the users and from the users back to the company. And you just have to filter a lot. And so I call this an emotional burden. And when I tweeted that, I was definitely feeling it.
Yeah.
And I mean, this comes with the territory. But, if you want to actually change anything about it, instead of just tolerating it, you take over product. And this is something I actually ended up doing at Temporal. I ended up being the PM of the TypeScript experience. And actually, I think it helps, that sort of two-way synergy, because after I was done being the PM, then I also flipped back to my DevRel role and started talking about the stuff that I did. Right. So like, if you were heavily involved in talking to users and designing the thing, then you can very authentically say like, I designed this, and like, here's how you're supposed to use it. And people believe
right.
it.
Right. And if you're that highly invested, you might as well just be repping your own product, right? I mean, that seems to be the move, right? Because now that's how it's easier than convincing the product manager to do your things, is to just become the product manager. And that can be very difficult unless it's your own company, in which case you wear all the hats and you bear all the burdens, but you also get all the upside.
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm doing. But I would say like it's a very tough job to hold all those things in one go. And I think it's a very privileged position to be in, to help to do that for a company that has a lot more resources than you. So I'll just say like, if people are interested in entrepreneurship, you want to be able to build and you want to be able to sell. this is one of this sort of dev experience, DevRel combined with product role is probably one of the best jobs out there in developer tooling.
I agree. I think putting DevRel or whatever DevRel's function is, even if you don't call it DevRel, under product makes a lot of sense, because I think the reason why DevRel kind of gets this shill, as you mentioned earlier, Jared, or this bad rap or this sort of pejorative feeling is that you feel like you're out there trying to sell, and that's not your job. I think the job of DevRel generally is try to showcase the vision of where the product is going and get that resonance from the community and see if it's landing, and also create advocates out there who become passionate about where you're going, so that you can become essentially take that wisdom you've got back to the team and say, this is what we're doing. This is how people feel about it. This is where they're not getting it. This is where my demos and my tutorials are not landing. This is where my 101s they're falling short. It's because of this part in the workflow or whatever it might be. Their job is not to sell. Their job is to tell and share the story, which if you do it right does sell, but you're not trying to sell. Even in our ad spots, I don't know how much you care about these things, Swyx, how we do our ad spots. I literally tell these people that I sit down with more often than not, CEOs of the companies, and I'm like, I don't want you to sell. Okay. If in this conversation you're trying to sell, we're doing it wrong. I just want you to share your story. Can you share your story for me? And not that story on my phone. Sorry about that. It is to just don't sell. That's my job, to tell people where to go and to be excited about your thing and to give people waypoints. Don't come on here and sell. Same thing for DevRel. Don't go out there and sell. Just tell people what we're doing and get that feedback of how we're doing it. And is it working? And how do we change to make it work?
If I could make one tweak, instead of just tell people what we're doing, you should nerd snipe them. Like, that is the way to hook developers, is like tell people what hard problem you worked on, and tell people like the backstory to why you worked on it, or like what's the sort of intellectual history behind these ideas, and like why is this the thing that is inevitably what everyone is going to be going towards.
Yes.
Like whether or not it's you, or like you build it in-house, or you buy it from us, or like you know, someone else builds it, doesn't matter. The industry is going this way. Are you with us, or are you part of the last century or whatever? Like, that is the kind of story that I like to tell, which is not just tell us what you're doing, but put us in a broader narrative of like, where are we in that moment in history? Mm-hmm. And I think you get the nerd snipe. Definitely try to show a little bit of the behind the scenes. I think a lot of like standard marketing advice is benefits over features. And I think there's a little bit of inversion for developers, where you want to talk about features because you let the developers figure out the benefits. But like, go down to the implementation details, because people love to learn about that so that they never have to touch it. And then go like, here's the benefits of that. But if you only lead with benefits, like, we will accelerate your digital transformation by 10% in next quarter. I don't care as a developer.
Right.
Show me how it works and tell me something cool.
One flavor of that I think would be interesting, which maybe we've done, maybe we haven't done, and we definitely do on some of our shows, is like, tell me how hard this particular thing was to build. Like, what'd you have to go through to build this thing?
Exactly.
And that's where the nerd sniping comes, right?
The nerd snipe is so effective for selling the product, but also selling you on working with me, right? Like, come join us. We work on cool
shit. Tan.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I'm like, always like, I cannot tell people enough to do this, because I think you have to kind of repeat it to them a lot, that people want to be nerd sniped. Like, they want to work on hard things. And if you just emphasize the nerd snipe, you accomplish both goals of doing any public appearance, which is recruiting and selling.
Nerd sniping for the win. So riddle me this. How has data science not been rebranded into AI engineering or data engineering, or you pick your flavor of the day? It seems like the data scientists are just doing what they were doing before, mostly. Maybe there's some deployment things going on now, and just like changing the label on their business card.
I think there's definitely some rebranded data scientists that are transitioning over to generative AI really well. But I think there's a qualitative difference in the kind of people that are doing really well in generative AI that have no shared history, no shared skills, no shared language with the data scientists, right? Like, there are many, many successful AI engineers that do not know Python, right? And for data scientists, not knowing Python, not knowing pandas is like, what are you even doing here? You're not part of our club.
Okay, so you're saying the opportunity has broadened the industry to where you don't need to have the same background as a traditional data scientist.
And this is not to say that data scientists' demand has gone down at all. Like there's been a secular growth trend for decades. I would just say like this is just a different type of skill set that makes you successful in this era rather than the previous era. And whether or not you're successful here relies a lot more on your creativity and full stack product development skills than just pure data science, because data science comes in later when you have data to work with. But now when you have foundation models that you can just prompt and make an MVP so quickly, you actually need to be creative and quick to market rather than being deliberative and analytical. Being analytical actually slows you down and makes you too conservative. You're worried, like, what are you doing worrying about costs when the cost of intelligence for GPT-3 goes down 90% a year? That kind of stuff.
Makes sense. So what are the attributes of an AI engineer?
I have a convenient blog post to
oh gosh,
to refer to people.
Please read it out loud to us now.
I mean, obviously, it's not to be annoying, but I do actually have a blog post for this, and that's part of the sort of meta game I do preach to people about the learning in public, which is like anytime there's a frequently asked question, you should have a canonical blog post for it. Not just because you can be that annoying person to send it to people, but actually because you can actually spend the time to think about it. So you have a more complete thought. I think Kelsey Hightower often says you don't really know what you think until you write it down. And the reason he's so thoughtful is actually he writes a lot of stuff down first. So there's the Rise of the AI Engineer post that just celebrated its 1 year anniversary, and it's the start of a lot of things I'm doing. And more recently, we actually published a hiring AI engineer post that actually published some sort of reference job descriptions for people. And I like the sort of framing of offensive and defensive AI engineering. Defensive meaning like being able to create systems that fundamentally work on top of non-deterministic AI models, right? LLMs, as you might know, like hallucinate, they're non-deterministic, and they actually fail a lot. Like the P99s of latencies like are ridiculous sometimes, just for whatever inference load reasons your selected API provider might have. And so it's effectively like, how do you create a reliable service on top of fundamentally unreliable foundations? Sounds very familiar. That's distributed systems, and like a lot of the sort of same language, maybe slightly different tooling emerges coming out of that. That's defensive though, and then there's also let's just call it preventing against regressions or optimizing cost, and that's a lot of like fine tuning for smaller models and all that good stuff. But really, offensive AI engineering is exploring new frontiers, right? Like this capability just came out. How can we put that to good use in a sort of end user product way that immediately clicks for them and generates a lot of revenue? I think the image companies have actually had the most success out of this. Midjourney is my sort of favorite example of this, making something like $300 million a year with 50 employees, completely bootstrapped, like no VC funding. So for people counting at home, that's $6 million per employee. And I think there's more examples I can list in there, but it doesn't really matter. Like if the new capability comes out, is it the optimization guy or the creative technologist that wins? It's the creative technologist. And for me, it's like, okay, like, most engineers are not creative technologists, but are they product people? Can they think about like, how do I use this capability that just emerged to solve problems for a customer in some way? Like they can be more creative there. So I'm trying to basically explain why that is qualitatively different than the data scientist role, which is mostly analytical, which is still very important. It's just like a different skill set that like, if you just don't have that gene in you of like being creative as a product thinker, then you won't be as successful as someone who is.
Who are some other people besides Midjourney who are very successful? Well, because from my perspective, I've seen aside, set ChatGPT and the alikes aside, general use chatbots, like that's as a category, set that category aside. Obviously huge success, right? Lots of value, etc. Give you that. Midjourney, give you that one. But the companies that have brand new products that are making moves in the marketplace that have gone beyond demo and hype to actual product people are paying for, I don't have my thumb on that pulse. I'm not seeing much of that. I'm sure you're seeing more of it. So that's what I'm asking about specifically.
Yeah. So my bar for let's have a bar, right? For like it's easy to get to production on a small use case that nobody cares about. So production to me is not good enough. So let's have an even more aggressive bar of it must make $100 million a year. Like that's at a point where you can IPO as an independent company, right?
Okay.
Like maybe the bar is 200, but that's just a factor of 2. So let's just say $100 million. What AI use cases have made $100 million a year, right? So obviously we talked about Midjourney. I have 4, and then like the 5th one's more speculative. Conveniently, this is another blog post called The Anatomy of Autonomy if people are looking this up. But generative text for writing, Jasper AI and Writer.com both have about 100. Jasper reached the 75 million ARR because before they imploded, and Writer.com I think is comfortably at 100.
How do they implode? Did I miss Adam? Did you miss this? What happened with Jasper?
So I don't know what their revenues are today, but effectively they got rug pulled.
They got acquired.
Well, they imploded before they got acquired.
They got rug pulled.
The acquisition was the exit. Yeah. I don't look. Obviously I'm just saying secondhand stories from other people, so don't quote me on any of this. But effectively, the founder sold
you're
a
on a
bunch
podcast being transcribed, so
yeah, but I'm transcript. It just said, "Don't quote me on this."
Don't quote my transcript.
Okay.
The founder sold a whole bunch of secondary and it just pieced out.
Okay.
So he basically lost interest in developing the company, but then also it seems like they built a very successful business on top of GPT-3 before ChatGPT. And then a whole bunch of people found out after ChatGPT that they weren't actually doing that much on top of GPT-3, and then they migrated to ChatGPT. So they were basically killed by ChatGPT is the common narrative. I don't know how true that is, because their focus was very, very strong on e-commerce on Facebook. The reason you don't hear about them because you're not on Facebook. They are. They did very, very well. They went from 0 to 75 million revenue in 2 years. Very few people have done that. But anyway, so since then, the emergent winner in that sort of generative text for writing categories is Writer.com. They seem to have figured out the sort of post-ChatGPT navigation, which is not hard. Like focusing on users and building differentiated features is, on top of the model, is the job of AI engineering. And you just have to do a more creative, more dedicated job, staying on top of it and not being defeated by OpenAI's like first move into chatbots.
Right.
So I don't know if that's a fair, like, I really want to stress, like, I don't know, like, this is not my industry. Like, I don't know this specific writing case, like whether that's a fair characterization of what Jasper went through, but it is an interesting story. But so fair amount of revenue there. Copilot, now I think 200 million in ARR. So like well past. Right. And there's a bunch of other smaller Copilot competitors, all with like decent revenue, many of which spoke at the engineer conference that I held. So you can go look at that. ChatGPT, I think something like 2 billion a year in revenue.
I ruled that one out.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the 4 categories that we are like very, very sure like make sense. Right. There's a bunch of like sort of Copilot for other knowledge worker type things. Like Harvey is now the emergent example for like, we are Copilot for law and every lawyer needs this or you're behind. Like, fine. Right. So for every knowledge work profession, there will be a Copilot for X. Right. And each of those things will easily make $100-200 million because you are replacing a whole bunch of junior workers for that. We can talk about the replacement theory issue, but like there is real revenue here. There's a real case for generative AI. It does not have to get smarter to be useful. Okay. The 5th category, beyond all this, is the agents category, which is the most contentious one, right? It was a complete bubble last year. This year, the bubble company is Cognition, Devin. Also spoke at my conference, the first time they ever spoke at a conference. I like them. I have access and I use them. We can talk about Cognition if you want. They're not the only players in this game of like the fully autonomous agents. This one happens to be code related, but there are others that are not code related. I do think that whoever eventually cracks this will be able to make significant revenue, but we haven't seen it yet, obviously. But the bar is, for everyone listening, is can it make $100 million? And if that's not good enough for you, nothing is good enough for you, right? Like, if your bar is higher than mine, then you're just gonna have to wait longer to see the results. But this is happening in progress, and you can either criticize it from afar, or you can just get in earlier and track the progress as I'm doing.
Hey friends, I'm here with Brandon Fu, co-founder and CEO of Paragon. Paragon lets B2B SaaS companies ship native integrations to production in days with more than 130 pre-built connectors or configure your own custom integrations. Brandon, there's a certain level of pain that a product team or an engineering team has to endure to, let's just call it rolling your own integrations. Help me understand that pain, that angst for those teams. Help me understand that true pain of delayed integrations for a product, not integrating or having to roll your own integration, this seemingly slower route to integrations.
I think for context, one of the reasons we started Paragon is that today the average company uses over 130 different software applications. So that means if you're a B2B software company selling into the markets, there's over 130 of your customers' applications that you probably need to connect your tool to, because customers today expect that any product they buy is going to work seamlessly with the hundreds of other applications that they're using. Of course, we see this when companies come to us and they say, hey, we have a backlog of 10 or 20 or 50 integrations that, our sales team has told us we're losing deals because customers are asking us to integrate with all these different apps and we can't deliver on those integrations, or maybe our competitors are integrating with these tools. And the problem that results in for product and engineering teams, of course, is how do we build and maintain these integrations in a way that's scalable, that we can not just satisfy what customers are asking for us today, but we can maintain those integrations in a way that's scalable for the next 100 customers, the next 100 integrations that we need to build.
So for engineering, one of the challenges, obviously, the backlog and prioritizing time for certain features or integrations. But then there's this other side where you gotta really learn every single API, and everything is hand-rolled, custom, maintained, and over time that kind of gets, I gotta imagine, kind of taxing on teams. What do you think?
So most engineers know that, every API is completely different, can be completely different in terms of how they handle authentication, in terms of how they deal with different record types. And so it becomes this problem for engineering teams to basically have to become experts in other people's APIs and what could be dozens or hundreds of different APIs. And to build those integrations, we've seen can take as much as 3 to 6 months per integration for a developer to write the code to build that integration. And it depends on the use case, of course, and the type of product that you're integrating with. But of course, that becomes a massive challenge at scale when you're looking at how do we scale our product to support 10 or 20 or 50 different integrations. So again, Paragon was really designed to solve that problem and to distill the complexities and the nuances and the differences between hundreds of different SaaS apps into a single connecting platform, into a single SDK that your engineers can install in your app and then easily connect your products to all these different SaaS applications in the market.
Okay, Paragon is built for product management, it's built for engineering, it's built for everybody. Ship hundreds of native integrations into your SaaS application in days, or build your own custom connector with any API. Learn more at useparagon.com/changelog. Again, useparagon.com/changelog. That's useparagon.com/changelog.
I would love to hear more about Cognition and Devin. It seems like they were unscrupulous in their marketing with the Upwork thing.
Oh, God. Okay. I will defend them here. So yes, the headline on Hacker News reads Cognition or Devin debunked, right? Very nice alliteration there. Out of the 9 videos that they produced, one of them was overstated claim, which I agree they should not have put out.
And the claim was that this bot could make money on Upwork autonomously.
Yeah, paste in an Upwork job and it would just do the rest and make money for you.
Right.
That was obviously there was a human behind that, being the bridge from Upwork to the bot, and also the bridge from Upwork from the bot to Slack, which it does not. The Devin does not have a Slack integration. So some stuff in the video was not the true Devin experience, or they failed to show. It's how like when people market games, they tell you if it's like in-game render or if it's just some artist rendition of what the game should feel like. And that one was definitely the artist rendition of what the game should feel like eventually. But yeah, I mean, like one video was inadvisedly produced. The guy who made it owned up to it and said like, yeah, sorry, I should not have done that. But like that doesn't take away that this is still the most significant agent we've ever seen outside of OpenAI. Prior to this, my reference for best agents outside of the self-driving cars that we have in San Francisco, because those things are the best agents in the world. Second best agent in the world was ChatGPT Code Interpreter. Since then we have Devin, and then since then we have Claude Artifact from Anthropic, which we can talk about. But Devin is really good. Like it's like really, really good agent, actually a really good generalist agent, not even factoring in next to the code writing ability. And I hope that people don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because unless you've actually tried it, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just reading headlines and you're just repeating the last headline that you just read.
Well, we can't try it because we sign up for a wait list and then they don't give you access to it. And so what do you want us to do besides speculate? We can't.
Maybe spend less time on things where you're just going to repeating headlines. I don't know.
I'm not spending any time on it. I watched the Upwork video. I watched the debunking video. He certainly debunked what they did, and there was no question to it. So I understand that you're okay with 9 out of 10 times I tell the truth. But when I'm coming out and trying to make a splash and I'm lying in my marketing material, sorry. I'm just gonna go ahead and remember that.
That was a bad idea, and they should not have done it.
Yeah.
Still, it's a good product. I have to square those two.
Which I can't. I have to take your word for it.
Yeah. I have the fortunate ability to say I have no vested interest in Devin. I just they gave me access. I used it. I was impressed. And so was Patrick Collison. So was Fred Ursum from Coinbase. There's a bunch of people who cannot be bought who like it.
Sure.
That's deep. That's good. That's good.
I'll take your word for it.
I'll take your word for it.
I can't do anything else.
So can we but can we talk about I think the technical design of it can be replicated. I think the real question, the thing that people really should be talking about instead of the video, which was a mistake, one-off mistake, the most structural issue with Devin is, can he be cloned? How thick is their moat? This is a 6-month-old company that is now valued at $2 billion, right? Which is absurd by any stretch of the imagination. So now that's the real question, which Devin has to answer, and the rest of the sort of AI engineering industry has to answer. There's a project called Open Devin that is trying their very hardest to replicate it. I've interviewed both of them. You can check it on my podcast. I would say that Devin is still ahead. Who knows how long it's going to last? But I think that the sort of structural merits of what Devin has innovated in terms of how agents should be interacting with each other, what are the necessary components of agents, that is going to stick. And if you focus too much on the marketing video, you are going to miss the actual lesson to be learned from Devin, which is that, hey, your agent should have a coding environment, should have access to a browser, should have a plan, and should have, let's say, a terminal and interactive chat bot where you can sort of observe what it's doing and correct it in real time, and it can respond to you in real time. That is the UX that has wowed all these people, wowed myself. I have never seen it in any other agent before. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be the standard or state of the art for all agents going forward because it's so good.
What are the odds that something like that, which is very general, as you said, just gets Sherlocked by OpenAI?
In a way, it has been, but not by OpenAI, it's by Anthropic, right? Which is the other thing that I mentioned. So that's Claude artifacts is the other thing that people should really think about. They definitely looked at Devin and were like, oh yeah, we're taking a bunch of that. They did not do the browser access because these guys are way too worried about safety as compared to me and as compared to Scott from Devin. So Claude Projects is basically an advanced version of ChatGPT's code interpreter that can render a working web app. I often say the sort of spicy version of this is that Anthropic did more for code agents in 2 months than Replit has done in 2 years. Because it's basically Replit. So for the record, for my Replit friends, obviously they did not build a full sort of REPL environment in IDE. Anyway, but still you can do very significant programs in Claude now that you could not do in ChatGPT code interpreter. You can do in Devin, but Devin is slower than Claude and less generally capable than Claude. It's just very, very good. And for the first time, people are actually openly talking about Anthropic being better than OpenAI. OpenAI has lost its crown as the undisputed number one, which is wild. I did not expect a year ago to be living in this world, but now we do live in a world where it's sort of a multipolar world where there are multiple sort of top powers in this space. Mm-hmm. It's very, very good. And you can try it, unlike Devin.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. That does sound good. Love some competition for OpenAI. Of course, there's been, turmoil over there as well. And there's been interesting things going on inside and around OpenAI.
Maybe for the engineers and listening, I would say the progress here has been at the model layer. So Cloud Artifacts is built on top of 3.5 Sonnet, which is the current world-best model. But also there's a significant amount of AI engineering that was required to build Devin and to build artifacts. And I think that if you want to see what the future of sort of AI engineering should look like, you should be trying to build a clone of this thing. That's what I'm trying to do. Because I think a lot of AI engineering will look like this. Will look like, how do you wire up a model to the real world to produce projects of significant value that you would otherwise have had to assign to a junior engineer? I think that is absolutely the sort of gold trophy that people are going for right now. And obviously, like the step beyond that is artificial general intelligence, but this is a pretty good second place.
A $2 billion market cap in 6 months is absolutely amazing. And I think that...
I mean, it's a bubble.
Sure.
Yeah.
Clearly. But still, the fact that it took 6 months tells me it's going to take less time when more people are applying to that. And so, like, is there actually a moat there? Time will tell, I guess.
Time will tell. They're trying to build one. I think so this is a question of business and less about tech. And the moat is really user data, right? The more people you can get coding with this thing, and the more you can observe how people interact with these agents. Like Devin has a 6-month head start on everyone else on how people work with Devin-like agents. And if Devin-like agents is like the goal of this thing, then like they will have the best RLHF feedback data on the planet for specifically this task, which is the same motivation that OpenAI had with ChatGPT, which is, they kind of lucked into this, but now they have the longest series of like chat-oriented data sources that human feedback data that you previously had to pay a lot for, and then so that mode is the data mode, but then actually it also becomes you're investing ahead of where the capabilities are. So you're sort of saying like, I will build code, I'll write manual code to build out the capabilities that I don't have yet. But as the capabilities grow in the fundamental model, you can just kind of swap them out for your sort of handwritten code and be more generally capable with the scaffold that you already built ahead of time. So I feel like I'm being vague there, but you'll see this in the form of the model's ability to interact with the real world. A lot of times you're writing integrations, you're writing like, oh, it'll interface with OpenAPI. Like, screw that, man. Like the future is just models like surfing websites, just like anyone else would surf websites, and interacting with them exactly like you would interact with them. But right now we have to use the crush of code. In future, we don't. Like, yeah.
Models surfing websites. How does that sound, Adam?
Dangerous, cool, amazing, awesome. Yeah,
it's a new world. Yeah, on the grander timescale of this, like this is happening within the last 3 years. What does 30 years of this do? What does 300 years of this do? Like, we are birthing a new life form. I do think about that timescale as well. And so like it's just an exciting time to be alive and to observe this. I don't think it's useful to try to resist it because it's happening anyway. I think this is why alignment is important, because the people who have believed in this way earlier than anyone else is the alignment people. They took AI safety most seriously because they knew this was coming, and the rest of us are just waking up now. And the current mindset is, how do you control something that's smarter than you? Because it's going to be. And so I think that is probably the right mode to think about it. The relevant paper for people interested is the weak to strong generalization paper from OpenAI, which is written by Jan Likit before he left for Anthropic. I do think like if you're worried about the safety elements, people are working on it. They are trying to look for similar-minded people. You can go apply for those jobs.
Well, there's always the plug, right?
The plug?
You just pull the plug. Yeah, like the legit electronic plug, unless we give them the new life form we're birthing, as you've just eloquently said. Which I'm taken aback by, but I also want to dig into, because it's like, wow, are we really creating a new life form? Kind of. Like, what is it that will give it autonomy, the AGI-ness of it, I suppose? And this is the holy grail question everybody's doing.
We all need to partake in some marijuana before having that conversation.
I know. Gosh. So a lot of AI discussions tend to devolve into existential risks and AGI discussions. And part of my goal with defining AI engineer is to create a space where those discussions are the side discussions and not the main thing, because we're all here to engineer. We're all here to build for today's problems with today's capabilities. And I think that's a lot of how I think about my impact in this field, which is how do I guide people in a more positive direction that basically nobody's against. A lot of DevRel is the future is here is not evenly distributed, but a lot of engineering here, especially in AI, is the future is here, but it's not evenly distributed. And how do we distribute it best to everyone else? I come from Singapore. One of my favorite stories to tell is that the Singapore government is embracing AI really well for their older folks, the people who don't speak English, the people who are disabled, the people who need the natural language interfaces to the many, many digital forms that are coming up in our lives. And applying this AI technology to that civil service, I think is like the best form of like how we do AI engineering. So yeah, I mean, we don't have to go to the freshman dorm room conversation of like, are we bootstrapping a life form? That's fun to discuss. happy to engage with that. But like, why I try to keep it to the engineering conversation is to let people have a way to ground their conversation in what can we do today.
But you're the one who said we're literally creating a new life form.
Yes, I do.
So
also
you
believe
opened the
that.
topic.
I'm sorry.
Which that's okay. Which I think is well, and I've been silent for quite a bit because I'm listening quite well, and I'm just slurping up all the things you're saying. And then I'm also feverishly trying to find where Mark Rasinovich said in our conversation with him. Mark Rasinovich is the CTO, I believe, of Azure, right, Jared?
Correct.
So we met Mark at Microsoft Build 2024, where it was just like basically all AI everywhere, all in on AI, as we said. And Mark said, and I'm thinking like, well, Mark is, part of Microsoft, and they're one of the largest companies that benefit well from OpenAI's innovations. Sure, the discussions around Cognition as well, Devin. But Mark said, I'm paraphrasing because I couldn't find the quote, and I was hoping I could find it. But Jared, please fill in the blanks. Mark said, paraphrasing again, that he is not worried about AI taking over developers' jobs. But then you just say we're literally birthing a new life form, and then you're speculating / revealing to some degree the agent OS of Cognition and Devin, and what you think would be a good outline for anyone trying to copy what they've done. Meanwhile, saying they have a leg up in terms of time frame, 6 months. A lot of time in today's world, but realistically not a lot of time. And then you throw out, what was it? 2 billion? 3 billion? What was the valuation? 2, which is just incredible. Like, one, what is that number based on? Is it based on somebody is willing to purchase it for? Is that the valuation? Is it based on like 10?
Yeah, Founders Fund invested at $2 billion. I think they gave them a few $100 million or something.
Gotcha. Okay, so the valuation is based on venture capitalists coming in and say, okay, we'll give you X at X valuation. I guess I'm just camping out there and sort of sitting back thinking like, gosh, is this really a new life form we're birthing? And if so, I think we got to talk about that.
Sure.
Well, maybe I could square the circle here, because Swyx was talking on a very long time span, and I found the exact Mark Rasinovich quote.
Thank you.
And he said, I can tell you we're not at risk anytime soon of losing our jobs. So maybe that harmonizes your stance, Swyx. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. We should always be clear about what time span we're talking in, and there's a big difference between the near term and long term. I just think that in the grand scheme of things, if most AGI timelines, by the way, are like by 2050 we shall have AGI, right? That's within our lifetimes, guys. Like it's time to panic if you really think this is going to end humanity.
It's time to panic.
Seriously, like we have Eliezer Yudkowsky saying we should ethically, the right thing to do right now is to bomb all data centers in the world because humanity ends otherwise. He said this in the New York.
I mean, I guess if we're in charge of this in terms of innovating it and creating it, how can we not have fail-safes in place to be in charge of if it goes wrong? I mean, I think that's where it has to come down to, because I jokingly said pull the plug, but I literally mean if we control the physical hardwired plug into the wall. Now, Jared, if that book I mentioned in the intro that I shared with you a while back, which I can happily share here too, if that happens, then we're in a different world. I speculated a good intro to a book or a movie, and I'm thinking more movie than book, but all good movies tend to begin as books. Sometimes they're bad movies of good books. But anyways, I digress. I was speculating that this intro scene to this movie was a very beautiful cinematic scene where you see this human being, and it's so strange to say things like this, a human being is happily racking and stacking these servers, happily organizing this hardware, happily instantiating a new machine into the rack. Meanwhile, the entire task was given to the human by artificial intelligence. So the boss, you said before, live above or below the API. I think we're kind of like...
Nice callback.
That's a good callback. I forgot about that.
A version of that is like above or below the AI. You just take out one letter.
Oh.
Because at that point, it's like, well, in the future, this dystopian, potentially non-dystopian future, we're subjects of AI, but only if we allow it. But if we're in control of the hardware and we're the physical beings for now. Because you do have Boston Dynamics out there creating robot dogs and the latest version of Atlas. Like, at what point do we lose? I guess
That's why he's saying bomb the data centers, man. Bomb them.
Gosh, I got to back up
Pretty
on
much.
that one.
Pretty much.
So the question is, can we pull the plug on these bots? For what it's worth, this is my favorite joke in this category, which is Sam Altman is very well known for carrying around a blue bag, and everyone's jokes is that like the button is in there. That like if he ever needed to push the button, it's in the blue bag. I don't think we can, because the secret's out that it's mostly possible to simulate intelligence inside of neural networks. And even if the current transformer paradigm doesn't really pan out for that, something else will, because we evolved from non-sentient life forms, we think, unless we were created from a span of 7 days. So if we can evolve, something else can evolve too. And we are currently speedrunning evolution of this particular life form. So like, I don't think that's necessarily a negative for us, except that in every prior incidence of more primitive civilization encountering a more advanced civilization, the more advanced civilization accidentally wipes out the more primitive civilization. And right now, AI is not more advanced than us, but it is growing much, much faster than us. It is spreading much, much faster. It learns much faster than us. And so we need to figure out how to contain this or eject it from our solar system so it doesn't affect us. I don't think either of these are. I don't think that's possible. So we have to contain it. We have to align it. Like that's the only way.
All right.
So yeah, and also I also don't think that capitalism and this safety this sort of top-down safety are aligned, in a sense that in order to control this, if you really are concerned about safety, you have to nationalize all AI labs, and then you cannot stop there, because what use is nationalizing things within one border? You have to nationalize all borders. So you have to take over the world and control all AI developments if your intention is to really control from a top-down basis of all AI safety. So that's not happening.
Yeah, borders are a big concern.
This is the classic, like, China's going to do it if we don't do it.
Well, there's this show out there called Westworld. Have you seen this show, Westworld, Swyx?
Yeah. Great season 1 and 2.
Okay, you got to watch season 3.
Isn't there season 4?
There's going to be a season 4. No, so I would digress.
There is?
No, I think there was going to be a season 4, but I believe it was canceled. I don't know. It's an HBO show. I got to check in on that. So in my opinion, the entire show is worth watching for season 3 alone. And I think you only really need to maybe even watch recaps of season 1 and season 2 to watch season 3. I don't think it's almost standalone, in my opinion. And I think anybody out there listening to this right now, head nod into season 3 is know where I'm going. And I don't want to ruin any of the plot for you all because you haven't watched it, but I would say go watch it. A lot of what you're talking about here is represented some way, shape, or form in the intelligence and the autonomous beings, let's just say, that are out there in the world doing different things. And it's very captivating from a cinematic standpoint. And I think if we're 26 years away from 2050, I had to do the math there real quick. If we're 26 years away from AGI, or even the beginnings of it, and Cognition can create what they created in 6 months or some span of time less than a year, I got to imagine whatever was in Westworld Season 3 is closer than we think. Some version of that is closer than we think. It could be 2070.
Yeah, plus minus 20 years.
God, I don't even know how to do math these days. Like 30 more years after that, 20 more years after that. It's got to be close. If you get to that speed of creation. And then I would also say the other thing I've learned about is von Neumann probes. It's this idea of a self-replicating spacecraft. So shooting it out into space is not going to be helpful because they might allow themselves to escape on a von Neumann probe, which will just self-replicate. It will begin to ore and mine planets to create new materials, to create themselves, to just replicate and come back and do whatever. Now, they could be peaceful if you've read the books I've read. Anyways.
Yeah. No real response to any of that apart from it'll happen. Really, if you want to be a player on this stage, you either need to be a political leader of a world power, or you need to be a head of a major AI research lab. Basically, the rest of us don't really get a say. This is not where democracy has any sway over.
We are below the API. on this one.
Below the AI line.
Yeah.
I think we're above it in the sense of like, we do get freedom from, like, currently we do get freedom from like the mundane tasks. Like, I no longer care about doing like really minor features because I can just tell Cursor to do it for me, and it does it really well. And if Cognition pans out, or what something like Cognition pans out, then I will have a lot of PRs done purely by agents, and that's great. But like, yeah, we will live below. We always have and always will live below the power line. That's separate from the API line of people actually deciding the sort of future course of humanity. And like, I think where engineers really make or break here is whether or not we choose to join them and enable them, because they still need us to execute things. The one note of optimism, between the very short-term future, which is where we are today, and the very long-term future, which is when AGI is here, is that I do think that AI engineers are the last job to exist, because they are the job mathematically to eliminate the other jobs. Like, you need AI engineers to eliminate the lawyer. You need AI engineers to eliminate the executive assistant, right? So like, if you're worried about job replacement, go be an AI engineer, because that will be the last job. And then we'll be post abundance, and then we can explore the stars. But until then, you should be an AI engineer.
There's the sales pitch.
There you go.
If you would like to destroy all other jobs, become an AI engineer, and you will be the last person standing.
I do have to bring out my favorite TV show, Jared, Silicon Valley.
Well, you lost me at Westworld. I haven't seen a single episode. Don't know what you're referring to in season 3. So go ahead, man.
In the final episode of season 6, episode 7, called Exit Event of Silicon Valley, they're locked in, the Pied Piper offices, and they're dealing with what they're dealing with. Obviously, it has to deal with AI, because that's the conversation we're here right now. And Jared says, okay, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Somebody tell me how to feel. And Guilfoyle says, and this is my favorite line ever, abject terror for you, build from there. So that's my advice for everyone that is not a political power or whatever you just said you had to be, Swyx, to have any say in the future of this, because abject terror for you, build from there.
Yeah. I don't call it terror so much as we live in a point of history, right? History is happening. We're lucky to be alive to witness this in this moment. We have some minor sway on it, but like, history is bigger than us, and it's going to happen. It's going to take course. And I don't know, like, to me, like, I think this is part of the general EAC message, which is that if you're pro-life, you don't have to be only pro-human life. You're pro-life in any life form. You're pro-consciousness in any form. And if humanity happens to be the sort of bootstrap load sequence to what actually is what life is supposed to be, which is sort of more reliable, sustainable, faster learning machines than us, then maybe that's the natural order of things. I don't know. I would like it to not be the case, because I like humanity. I like my body, but we do live in a world where that is a possibility.
And this is why we almost outlaw conversations on artificial intelligence on this podcast, because of this. This is almost why we outlaw it. Almost.
I'll mention one last thing, maybe as a positive parting thought.
Please be positive.
I'll help you be positive. We used to basically completely throw in the towel on interpreting the model weights. GPT-3 was 175 billion parameters, absolutely like just meaningless numbers, like 175 billion meaningless numbers. And I used to just think of mechanistic interpretability as a joke. I will say Anthropic has done a crazy amount of work here recently to make features of models interpretable. And if we can study the brain of these things as they think, then we can control them very, very effectively. And I have gone from this will never happen to, oh, I didn't know that this is possible. And that's where you should read the paper Scaling Monosemanticity from Anthropic, which they demonstrated they can do it on Cloud Sonnet, which is a mid-sized model. We think it's something between 15 and 70 billion parameters. If we can do that to 15 to 70 billion parameters from a starting point of like less than 100 million parameters last year, we are accelerating our ability to interpret models faster than our ability to grow these models, and that is a good thing. Like we will fully understand and map this brain before it is bigger than us. And so like we will be able to control it if that is true. the trajectory of interpretability this year has been an unmitigated success story, and it is going to get better. And we might actually overtake our ability to grow these brains, and that will help us control these programs much more effectively than basically any other method possible.
I did not know that. That's very cool. What was the name of that paper again?
Scaling monosemanticity is the third in a trilogy of semanticity papers. The first one is superposition. I covered that in my sort of AI news newsletter. This is where I plug my newsletter for go subscribe if you want to keep up on this stuff, because that's my sort of daily pick of what the top thing to know is.
All right, Swyx. Well, fun times, great conversation. DevRel, AI engineering, AGI, the end of the world, all the things. We expect nothing less. Hook us up with links to your newsletter, to your pod, to all the things mentioned, and we'll make sure they hit the show notes for folks to follow up and connect with you on the interwebs.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I like this and friends format, because then we can just talk about whatever is top of mind instead of sticking to a specific company or piece.
All right. Well, that's all for now, but we'll talk to y'all on the next one. Bye, friends.
Okay, AGI is coming, 2050, mark it on your calendar. I know I have, because I'm kind of scared. As Gilfil said, abject terror for you, build from there. I don't disagree. Honestly, I'm a little bit terrified of what will happen when the reality of an AGI comes, especially when you contrast that against Boston Dynamics' latest HD Atlas update. I mean, it's kind of terrifying to think about that kind of robot potentially having AGI built in. Okay, enough doom and gloom. DevRel is here to stay. We've defined it, we've described it, but ZIRP is real, and ZIRP affects everything. And by the way, there's a bonus on this episode for our plus subscribers. Learn more at changelog.com/plus. It's better. It is better. Again, learn more and join the fold at changelog.com/plus. Okay, big thank you to our friends and sponsors at Sentry, at 1Password, and also our friends at Paragon. And a massive thank you to our friends at Fly.io. Over 3 million apps are now launched on Fly. As we said before, we're one of them. Learn more at Fly.io. And thank you to BMC, Breakmaster Cylinder, for those awesome beats. Well, that's it. This show's done. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, so basically started a podcast February of last year. We had a very good initial success right up to when we had George Hotz on. We actually hit number 10 on the US tech charts.
Nice.
So we actually overtook the A16Z podcast. Since then, we haven't really had a ton of hits, just slow, steady wins, I would say. And I feel like it's a little bit of a rut. I think Latent Space has done well serving its niche of we are sort of the AI engineering podcast. Tobias Macy from the data engineering podcast and Python podcast tried to get into the AI engineering space and ended up giving up on it. So I think we have stood the test of time. We're maybe it's mildly differentiated from Practical AI, which is the show that you guys run, and I'm wearing the shirt of today. I do think there's the meta game of all right, how do I run my existing operations better? Which is I need better editing. I need to do better on YouTube. I need to figure out my audio quality a lot better. And we can talk about all that. Then there's also that's the defensive side. Then the offensive side is how do I grow? How do I get to the next level? And for the growth element, it's very obvious. Book big names. That's it. That's basically it. It's the only thing people care about is just hearing from big names. And I can go get them. Mm-hmm. But I just feel then I'll just kind of devolve to an interview show just like everyone else. I'll just be one of many interview shows. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's where you're at. Well, that's further than most people get. So congrats on the success.